Welcome to an episode of InRange. I'm here at Woodland Brutality in West Virginia, 2022, and I've got Austin here from Aluminum Arms, who brought out the really cool new U.S. Army military contract, Sig MCX in 277 Fury, otherwise known as 6.8 by 51. Maybe you want to give us a little information here.
So Aluminum Arms, our company, picked this guy up because we're a gunsmithing manufacturer. We wanted to do some cool stuff with it, but one of the aspects of knowledge-wise, we wanted to get this out to some of the YouTube community guys, yourself included. And this guy is surprisingly an awesome weapon. I know there's a lot of controversy right now about it with Sig getting the contract and people saying we're moving backwards and it's heavy, and it is heavy. I'll say that it's a beast of a rifle, but what it's doing, I think, is an amazing trade-off. Obviously, you got your standard charging handle, your T-handle, you got a side charger, you got a 13-inch barrel flat, you got a adjustable and folding stock. The whole rifle is ambidextrous. You don't see an ambidextrous fire selector because we have changed that out, and you'll see that in a second. You got a modular system, quick barrel change, you got a 3D printed suppressor. This is a cool system.
Yep. So I think one of the reasons you see controversy in this, anytime there's going to be a new Army rifle selection process, there's going to be controversy.
True.
There has been through the history of the country. But I don't think this is going to replace the M4 in field service across the board very quickly, if at all. This is bridging a deficiency and gap that 5.56 has always brought to the table.
Precisely.
Which is range and armor defeating capabilities. Or at least that's the goal.
Yep. And this is one of the things that we have some ammo we're going to test for you guys, but we have two civilian ammos. So one is just going to be full metal jacket and one is going to be soft points. Soft point is going to be much higher pressure. If you can see one of these guys, much higher pressure. It's got the crink on the back. We'll discuss that in a second. And then the third ammo is going to be military ammo, which is a much higher pressure. And I don't have the energy from muzzle for that on me offhand, but it's going to be booking.
Yeah, so when you look at
thumper.
So there's a lot of things that are going on from an engineering and development standpoint with this weapon system, not just the rifle, that are worth talking about.
Correct.
This ammunition is one of them. So we've seen this experimentation going on for a while, but in this instance, when you bring the pressures up high enough that you can't handle a strictly brass case,
correct,
what they've done is added a steel head and combined it with a brass case. And in this instance, with this load, you're looking at a 140 grain bullet at around 3,000 feet per second. So this is the civilian equivalent, but when the military is using this, they're going to have cartridges much like this, where it's a steel case head and a brass cartridge case. And this is to deal with and mitigate an 80,000 plus PSI cartridge, which would normally have issues with case head blowout, which is right about here. So they have crimped and bonded this steel case head to a brass cartridge case to mitigate that issue with these very high pressure cartridges, which is how they're getting those high velocities with those 140 grain projectiles. Now, this also lends itself to someday in the future potentially being polymerized, where this steel case head will be bonded to a polymer cartridge case, but we're not there yet. So right now there is still a weight hit for using these cartridges in the field because you're dealing with brass, steel, and standard projectiles. But if they're able to do this with polymer, maybe they can mitigate the issue of adding weight to the soldier in the future. So here we have a 277 Fury, or 6.8.51 versus a 5.56. And you can see it is a much larger cartridge, very much in that 308 battle rifle class. And that is what they're moving to now, with much more capability than just standard 308. But that does come with the weight hit. But imagine if you took like a projectile that you see on M855A1 or something like that, put that into this type of ammunition system and push it even harder. That's where you start getting your even higher ballistic coefficient, but potential armor defeating capability.
Correct, and that's what they're searching for.
Now that said, this gun in the military configuration, as I understand, it's running at like 80,000 PSI, which is a hot
it's
cartridge.
Yeah. And that's why they need this this steel piece of the back, because when you overload a cartridge like that, it just blows out the back.
Yep. So other things that are worth mentioning from the manufacturing perspective is the suppressor itself, which is part of the military contract. Being that it's additive 3D printed, it means that it can be machined in a way that you could not normally machine ever before with normal milling and manufacturing processes.
Correct.
So this is a flow-through suppressor. It's a little heavy, but at the same time, their ability to design the baffles and the way it deflects the gas is different due to the 3D printed methodology.
True. So the military was very interested in flow-through suppressor, as in not getting as much gas for the shooter. And a lot of times, from a Aluminum Arms standpoint, when we've tested a lot of these flow-through suppressors, they aren't great at suppressing sound. They're good for gas to push it forward, but they're not great for suppressing sound. The civilian side, we like to chase quiet.
quiet as possible.
As quiet as possible, you know? So this one and some of the other Sig suppressors, and again, I don't work for Sig, I work for Limit Arms, but these are great suppressors as they are controlling sound, controlling the gas. They surprisingly have a good tone. That's what I'm going to say. There's a good tone to them.
Yeah, so imagine with this additive 3D printing methodology, you've got your baffles, but you've got the ability to cause vents to flow the gas instead of back pressure into the system out to the front.
Exactly.
And that changes, of course, the dynamic of gas to the face, but also should also help with the actual fouling of the system as a result.
Precisely.
So one thing about the suppressor is it does have some heft for sure, but again, this is meant for full auto fire. But being with additive printing processes, you can see that the actual flow through baffle system is definitely unique, unlike stuff you've seen generally in the field. So this is a product of additive 3D printing, even if it is in a metallic material versus a polymer. Regardless, that manufacturing process allows you to do unique things. So now this is a short stroke gas system. So there's a short stroke piston here that acts on an op rod, which then cycles a very Eugene Stoner looking bolt carrier group. We'll get to that when we take it apart.
Yes.
But so we're gonna do some live fire later, but why don't we put this down on the table, open her up and go through a field strip?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and field strip this, and I'm gonna go through the handling as well, first of all. So it looks very AR-like, right? You've got your mag release here, and you've got ambidextrous mag release here. In a really interesting, what would Stoner do type moment, we see a ambi bolt release, which is very PDQ-like in its functionality. It is not a PDQ, it is better than that really in terms of how it's machined, but it functions exactly like a PDQ, and that's kind of cool and brings a little happiness to my heart. We've got ambi charging handle. You've got a standard AR style charging handle, and if need be, one on the left side here as well, which is non-reciprocating.
Correct. One reason they did that is because side charger was what was requested by the military, but they found under stress, a lot of soldiers, career soldiers, went straight to the T-handle.
What they knew. Yeah, that makes sense. And the teardown you're going to see is extremely familiar to anyone that's ever used an AR. So there's 2 takedown pins. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Push it through with a cartridge just to make it a little easier. And they are captured. But then, of course, your lower comes off, and we're going to set that to the side for now. And here we have our upper, which is the part that we're really interested in. So this is the recoil spring, and you actually just push it down and carefully let it leak free. If you don't take control of it, it will fly across the room. But that's it for removing the recoil spring. Then you take your charging handle, pull that back, and pull out your bolt carrier group, which also comes with the op rod. That is a field strip of the upper, unless you want to do other things like take these bolts out, take out these 2 bolts and change the barrel. That's not what we're worried about here today. An ambi charging handle, which is also in its way it functions, very WWSD. The op rod just comes right out. It goes in only one way, so you can't screw that up. That makes it military proof. At this point, this becomes reasonably familiar to anyone that's ever used an AR, but a little different with some HK type flare. Sorry, Sig. You push out this little capture pin, which is captured, and at that point there's a safety back here, which is a mechanism to help with the hammer blow. You pull that up, and in doing so, the firing pin starts to extract. You kind of have to play with it a little bit, and I'm not familiar with it like someone in the field would be, but there we go. Firing pin comes out, and you'll see that it does have a spring on it. It is spring loaded and therefore should remediate any form of inertial blows to the primer system, or the primer, which would of course sometimes happen with the AR, quite rarely. At that point, pull out your carrier key and your bolt. And
super easy.
That's it. Again, the training on this should be quite easy to anyone that's familiar with the AR-15 family of weapons. And you'll notice the bolt, of course, has really thick, big lugs, which makes sense for considering the 80,000 PSI cartridge. Right. But also you have 2 ejectors, not just 1. That makes sense probably for making sure that you have really proper ejection processes with this gun. So, putting it back together, same processes apply. Scrape the dirt off, line it up, carrier key, pull that forward, pull up that little safety, or actually you can just push it out of the way with the firing pin. Gotta line it all up, which is trickier than it looks until you get used to it. Oh, there we go. Push in your capture pin, and your bolt group is back together. Reinstall your op rod. slightly put in your charging handle, because there's a little lip that recesses into the charging handle on the op rod, and you have to line that up into the charging handle to get it to all go. Make sure the bolt's forward, seat, close that up, reinsert your recoil spring, and put it back in without it flying across the planet. As so, and you are back in action. At that point, you would just pin it back onto the lower like you would with an AR. Pretty cool.
Pretty cool indeed. So the suppressor mount's super easy to use. As you can see, you have a locked and unlocked icon right there. You're gonna push that over, it unlocks, give it a few twists, and it comes right off. And you can see you got a short little flash hider right up here within the taper. No carbon buildup past the taper onto the threads, so you're greatly reducing your carbon lock. Put that guy back on, a few turns, locks into place. It's not going to come off. Of course, you have your adjustable gas block right here. When that guy gets hot, you put a hole right there so you can put a bullet in. Just do it like that.
All right, so let's go through the lower a little bit. Pretty standard for most people that have ever dealt with an AR style gun. Safety, of course, semi, full. Ooh, a preview of more to come later in the video. You have your mag release, ambi, one on the left, the normal one on the right. But even more importantly, you've got an ambi bolt release, which, wow, that looks really super PDQ familiar, like on the What Was Done to Do project. So here we have a militarily adopted rifle using a PDQ style, at least, bolt holder. That's interesting. Capture pins, mag well, all the normal stuff. The stock, of course, is collapsible and is folding, which is part of the benefit of having the buffer system being part of the upper assembly. So let me mention one thing first before we get going into the live fire with this gun. This is not the official optic. This is just a standard, relatively low-priced Tango MSR. It's what we had available. The actual contract has this whiz-bang thing that does like everything, like makes coffee, laser, whatever. But it's got all this stuff going on. The optic is a topic for another day. We're just using an LPVO on here. A decent one, nothing special, but this is what we had available and we've zeroed it out here, so this is what we have. So do not expect this to be a review of the optic system that's part of the overall package. What we're reviewing today is the gun, the recoil, the ammunition, everything about the firearm itself. Okay, we've moved up to a little bit, 50 yards on the full-size IDPA target, and I'm going to go ahead and flip this to full auto once I load it up. I'm going to try and do some controlled bursts. Pretty cool to have access to a full auto one. Let's see what happens here. And let's use our PDQ lever. Huh. Not bad at all. Actually, that was very controllable. 3-round bursts were easy to handle. You saw those times that I missed were me, but when I was on it, all 3 rounds hit. So that right there was not problematic at all. Let's go ahead and go with a 25-round mag. Do that one more time, because that was pretty solid. This is kind of shining in full auto. That ain't bad at all. Yeah, there's some misses there, but also if you were doing some suppressive fire, you could absolutely keep that at the target or whatever you were trying to suppress. Multiple hits with just single bursts, not a problem at all. I would say that this right here is shining in the full auto, guys, and the controllability is kind of what you've been hearing. I'm quite impressed by that. All right, so that went pretty well. We got 2 targets now. Let's try some transitions in full auto. Yeah, baby, that's pretty cool. I'm into this. This gun is absolutely controllable enough to do that. Those transitions back and forth were actually better than I was doing with semi-auto, just a little further back. Get on the trigger, keep the gun, control it, run it, don't let it run you, and you're gonna keep these rounds on the target. This is astonishingly controllable for what we're pushing out, like a 140 grain bullet at 3,000, and you can hear it ringing that steel like it really matters, because it does. So, in the full auto guys, I'm saying this thing is really shining. The other thing is, even though we've got this can on here, which is of course part of the contract, is it hot? Yeah, it's hot. But it is a flow-through can, and while you might be seeing some gas, I'm not getting any gas into my face. There was no disruption from the firing cycle in full auto into me as the shooter's face whatsoever. So that flow-through design, whatever else they're doing here to mitigate it, the charging handle, other things, no gas to the shooter whatsoever. So in that regard, another really stunning result, really shining here. So one of the stages we have here at Woodland Brutality for the rifle portion is the top 4 holes of the VTEC Barricade, running to a Barricade downrange and spinning a spinner at 50 yards. Just gonna go ahead and put the Fury through that. Here we go. Yeah, piece of cake to run this gun. 1 for 1 on the VTAC, 2 hits on the spinner. That's why they're doing this. Now, the question of humping this in the field with all this weight, that's a different question. But for performance, this gun slaps.
All right, so we're gonna get a slow-mo of the brass hitting me in the face.
Okay. So this is another one of the stages we have set up here today. We've got KD or knockdown targets at about 200 yards. They're quite small, little pepper poppers. And we've got full-size IDPA at 300 right around there. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this 6.8 by 51 and try to get a couple hits out there. I'm gonna start on the 2 300-yard targets. There's a little flasher on them. We've got 4K here. Hopefully you can zoom in and you can see them. Then I'm gonna move over to the 200-yard poppers. Yep. Hit. So Austin, I want to thank you again from Illumina Arms bringing out all this stuff.
Our pleasure.
Because we got to do a bunch of live fire today. We did full auto, we did a VTAC Barricade, ran with it, shot the spinner, shot some 300. And in that regard, I think it's very clear this gun performs.
Absolutely.
Mild recoil for what it's doing. 140 grain bullet, these velocities, this thing feels a lot more controllable than say a 308 Scar. But it is not an M4. When you hear on the internet,
Correct.
This thing recoils like 5.56. No, it doesn't. Physics apply. We are firing a battle rifle cartridge here.
Correct.
Okay? But what helps mitigate that to a degree is not only the design, the ergonomics, all that, the gas system, but it's also weight.
Exactly. And it is heavy. Like, you take the suppressor off, you're going to get a little weight reduction, but it is a heavy piece indeed.
As are loaded magazines.
Correct.
20 and 25 round magazines, fully loaded ammo. When you pick this up, you go, you know you got something on you.
Exactly.
So as with all things, it's a give and take, right? If you're going to go into the battlefield with this, you are inevitably, unless something else is going on, you're going to be carrying probably less ammunition. I can't see any other way to get around that.
Yep.
And if you're carrying less ammunition, that deprecates certain things. You were saying, like, when the military fixes one thing,
they bring up 10 more problems.
Right, and
that's
like,
exactly what they've done with this thing.
I think they have. They've also been asking this question for a long time: is the effectiveness of 5.56 sufficient?
Exactly.
And this is meant to solve at least some of that problem, as well as defeat enemy armor, etc. But in doing that, you're reducing the overall ammunition loadout of the individual soldier, depending on how many people have these in the field.
Correct.
And that means that things like bounding overwatch, suppression fire, while this is very controllable on full auto, when you have half the amount of ammunition on your body, you're not going to want to fire too much suppression fire before you're going to go bingo
Correct.
on ammunition.
Correct.
And that's a problem.
Absolutely.
So it's an interesting question. I personally think this is amazing. I think we're going to see it fielded in relatively small numbers for now.
Yep.
We're going to see adoption maybe grow as people realize this is a reliable and effective firearm.
Yep.
Will it replace the M4? I'm going to be skeptical and say I don't think so.
I think it'll go into the hands of marksmen. I think it'll DMR role. I think it'll go in the hands of some special operations. But every guy holding it, I don't know. I'm glad that at that aspect, I'm not in the military and I don't have to lug this around. But as a sports shooter, an enthusiast, I freaking love it.
Oh, yeah.
It's an awesome gun.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a thumper, and that round is hitting. It's like on the steel. If you guys see the video, the spinner.
And the
Awesome.
steel at 300 is just turning on its
Oh
axis.
yeah, it was churning out there.
When you hit with 5.56, it's kind of a dink. With this thing, it is moving the
It
steel.
is thumping.
So that's, I mean, that's evidence of that thereof. Now, this in smaller numbers as a DMR in a squad, and everyone around you has as much 5.56 on their person they can carry. Maybe that's the middle ground.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the middle ground. Putting this in the hands of every individual soldier or having all that going on, you are absolutely deprecating the overall sustainable length of firefight that they could maintain.
Correct.
But you can also increase their ability to engage at range.
Correct, and defeat body armor at that range as well.
True, but statistically speaking, throughout military history, engagements happen 300 yards and in. Almost always 100 yards are in.
Yep.
So these are real interesting questions.
Yeah, and the Scar's got the Sig's got a 13-inch barrel, but the Raptor that they're coming out with has a shorter one for CQB and everything. So that really close quarter combat if you need it. Can't wait to get my hands on that one too.
Sure.
It's gonna be a cool piece.
It's a give and take. So this
is.
is not meant to be a negative review. In fact, it's a positive review. The gun handles. This thing is amazing. Shoots extremely well. I think we demonstrated that in some of the video here. First time I ever fired it today, and it was slamming.
Yeah.
But would I want to carry it across the battlefield for myself? And I'm not a soldier. But if I thought you need to pick this thing up and walk as far as you have to that way,
yeah.
I wouldn't really want to do that. But I do want to thank you from Illumid Arms for
Yeah,
bringing
you're
this out and
very
providing all this ammo. So can you tell the audience a little bit more about you guys?
Oh,
before we
we're
close
based out in Reno, Nevada. We do gunsmithing primarily. We do a lot of CNC work. We do laser engraving. We do Cerakoting. You can check us out. We have a storefront as well. You can check us out at Illumid_arms on Instagram and same name at Facebook.
You can see it here because it's a little hard to spell.
Correct, yeah.
So it's right here for you. And you should check them out. They got a bunch of machine guns. Hopefully we'll do some more work in the
we
future.
will. I certainly think so.
Excellent. So I want to thank you for that. I do want to say that I didn't pay for a darn thing in this video. You guys brought it all. So
You let me shoot the match.
but
You let me shoot the match.
thank you, Patreon supporters, for providing the ability for InRange to be a thing. I want to thank everyone here at Woodland Brutality for making this match a success, and I want to thank you for bringing this to shoot. If you want to consider supporting InRange, you can find us at patreon.com/InRangeTV. The other thing you can do for us is subscribe, and more importantly, share the video with your friends because the YouTube algorithm sucks. Thanks for watching.